The following presentation is one that highlights some of the most important events in the role of the Republic of Texas Navy in achieving the independence of Texas. The Texas Navy is rich in history, and we encourage you to explore the complete role the Texas Navy played in creating the state of Texas. The role of the Texas Navy in winning and maintaining the independence of Texas was all but forgotten except for a few historians. The Texas Navy was made up of two navies: the First Texas Navy, which made possible the victory at San Jacinto. The Second Texas Navy prevented any seaborne invasions of Texas. The first real colonization of Tejas by Americans began after January 17, 1821, when the first Austin Colony grant was given to Moses Austin. Stephen F. Austin, his son, had joined his father in late 1820, but Moses Austin died from exposure to the elements on the 10th of June, 1821, only 5 months after receiving the Austin Colony grant. Stephen F. Austin obtained permission to bring in 300 families within the terms of the grant Moses Austin had received. The first of the 300 arrived in February 1822. The original grants provided that there would be no taxes for at least 6 years. The pioneers cleared and cultivated their land, and they started producing products that could be sold. The majority of the early settlers came by sea from New Orleans or Mobile, Alabama, to Galveston, Matagorda Bay, or to the mouth of the Brazos. Lumber, wool, and cotton from Texas were sent back to New Orleans by sea. The vast majority of the manufactured goods, from weaponry and ammunition to cloth to heavy equipment for sawmills and cotton gins, also came by sea to Texas. Therefore, the commerce of the early settlers depended upon the sea. Trouble between the Mexican government and the Texian merchants, farmers, and cattlemen began on April 6, 1830, when the Mexican government announced taxes would be collected to offset the cost of the garrisons and various ports. The first military clashes occurred in 1832 at Anahuac at the mouth of the Trinity River and at Velasco at the mouth of the Brazos River. Fortunately, no one was killed. Stephen F. Austin went to Mexico City to try and solve these problems, and he was arrested and jailed there on January 2nd, 1834. However, clashes again occurred in 1835 in Anahuac, and the first blood was shed at Velasco, where 7 Texians and 5 Mexican soldiers were killed. All this set the stage for the Texas Revolution. Throughout the first half of 1835, serious disturbances started up again between American-born merchants on the Texas coast and Mexican custom collectors. The government of Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna had instructed a new policy of closer control over Texas. A new garrison was established at Anahuac to support a new custom house there, and also at Galveston and Brazoria. In August 1835, in an act of deliberate provocation, merchant Thomas F. McKinney sent his schooner San Felipe from New Orleans to Brazoria, heavily armed and loaded with munitions meant for Texas revolutionaries. Also on board was Stephen F. Austin, just released from his imprisonment in Mexico. His presence was no coincidence, as Austin's ordeal had convinced him that peace with Mexico was hopeless. He was now committed to the revolutionary cause. On September 1st, Austin and his fellow passengers and most of the cargo had been transferred to a steamer, the Laura, by the time the San Felipe was approached by the Carrera. Both ships made clear their intentions to board and capture the other, and the battle was on. Heavy cannon and rifle fire was exchanged for about an hour, with the Carrera getting the worst of it. The next morning, pursued both by the San Felipe and the Laura, the Carrera was forced to surrender. The General Council, which was the original organized body to have regional representatives, began to meet to plan the Revolution of Texas in November of 1835. The council met at Washington on the Brazos. On November 14th, they formed the First Naval Committee. By the last of November, the General Council had selected Robert Potter, a former U.S. Navy junior officer, to become the first Secretary of the Texas Navy. He served in that position until October of 1836. Initially, the Naval Committee proposed the acquisition of two 12-inch gun schooners and two 6-inch gun schooners. During the War of 1812, ships designed as Baltimore clippers had had huge success capturing much larger British frigates during that war. These early Texians on the Naval Affairs Committee knew that Baltimore clippers would be the most cost-efficient and battle-worthy type of ships to form the first Texas Navy. The following pictures demonstrate why that Naval Committee made an excellent choice of ship type for the first Texas Navy. You are looking at a photo of the Pride of Baltimore. The Pride has sailed to 4 continents and is an excellent example of a Baltimore clipper, or as some would say, a topsail schooner. They were designed to be very, very fast. Being highly maneuverable was as important as being fast. A Baltimore clipper could turn much more quickly than any square-rigged ship, and they could almost sail into the wind. It took less than half the work for a Baltimore clipper to come about. During the War of 1812, they'd sail toward a large man-of-war and then suddenly turn, passing the stern of the man-of-war, firing a broadside to shoot out the rudder of the larger ship. Being fast and highly maneuverable allowed these Baltimore clippers to win sea battles with ships over twice their size. This is a picture of the Pride of Baltimore under absolutely full sail. Ships of the First Texas Navy. The General Council authorized the purchase of the Ingram, renaming it the Independence, and placed it under the command of Commodore Hawkins. It was quickly off the coast of Texas by January 10, 1836. The Council then purchased the Brutus, placing Captain Hurd in command and dispatching her off the coast in early February. The Council then purchased the Robin Williams, renaming her the Liberty, commanded by Captain W.S. Brown. The last ship was the Invincible, commanded by his brother, Captain Jeremiah Brown. The First Texas Navy was at full force and patrolling in the Gulf of Mexico by the end of February 1836. The delegates of the Republic of Texas at Washington on the Brazos declared their independence on the 2nd day of March, 1836. Commodore Hawkins received his official commission on March 12, 1836. He commanded the 8-gun schooner Independence. At the time of his appointment, President Burnett considered Hawkins to be the senior captain of the squadron, so Hawkins was referred to for the rest of his life as the Commodore of the Texas Navy. Early in March 1836, the Liberty, commanded by Captain Brown, captured the Pelicano off the shores of Sasal, Yucatan. Captain Brown was surprised and pleased with the prize holding kegs of gunpowder hidden in food kegs. The capture of the Pelicano proved vital in aiding the Texas Army with both food and munitions. In late March, Captain Brown was sent to the mouth of the Rio Grande near Matamoros. At that time, 2,000 troops were being mobilized in Mexico to reinforce Santa Anna. They were to go by sea from Mexico to the Texas coast. However, the Texas Navy prevented that seaborne invasion and resupplying of Santa Anna. The two most significant things the First Texas Navy accomplished was to prevent a resupply of food and munitions to Santa Anna, and to prevent a seaborne invasion of fresh Mexican troops. Once Santa Anna and his army reached the San Jacinto River, they were basically out of food. The Mexican general divided his men into three groups to forage for food. One group went to raid the town of Harrisburg, and another group went to raid the town of Brazoria. Santa Anna stayed at the ferry crossing at what is now called the San Jacinto Battleground, with approximately 1,200 soldiers. Sam Houston and his 700 men were very lucky to attack the camp at San Jacinto and to actually capture Santa Anna a few hours after the battle. Houston forced Santa Anna to send messages to the other two groups, instructing them to return to Mexico without harming any Texians. Effectively, the Republic of Texas won its independence on April 21st, 1836, at San Jacinto. The First Texas Navy was critical to that success. Samuel Rhodes Fisher was the second Secretary of the Navy of the Republic of Texas. He had represented the Matagorda municipality in the Convention of 1836 at Washington on the Brazos, where he signed the Texas Declaration of Independence. Fisher had come to Texas in 1830 to start a shipping business based in Matagorda to serve the Austin colony. Fisher had had previous naval merchant experience on the East Coast. President Sam Houston nominated Fisher as Secretary of the Texas Navy, and the appointment was confirmed by the Senate on October 28, 1836. He served until December 5, 1838. Ships of the Second Texas Navy. After winning at San Jacinto, the Republic of Texas had better credit and was able to buy a bigger navy. The first ship purchased was the Potomac in 1838, which stayed in Galveston Bay as a receiving ship. Then came the Charleston in 1839, later named the Zavala. 5 more ships were bought in 1839, the San Jacinto, the San Antonio, the San Bernard, the Wharton, and the Austin. In April of 1840, the Archer was purchased. Most all of the Second Texas Navy ships were much larger with many more guns. With a new fleet came a new commander. 29-year-old Edwin Moore of the United States Navy accepted a Commodore's post with the Texas Navy in December 1839, and he made the Austin his flagship. In the spring of 1840, hostilities broke out between Mexico and the province of Yucatan. A base was established at the Arceus Islands, some 100 miles west of Campeche. The Texas Navy spent most of 1840 in diplomatic cruising. Very few accomplishments were recognized, let alone any significant battles. The Yucatan government was so pleased with the Texas Navy, in 1841 they made an agreement with President Lamar to rent the protection of the fleet for $8,000 per month. However, Moore and his fleet returned to Galveston in May of 1842 when the Yucatan yielded to Mexico and canceled the agreement. You are now looking at the most advanced warship in the world in 1842. The Mexican government was well aware that the Texans had acquired a new and large and well-armed Second Texas Navy. However, the Mexicans were determined to retake Texas and to never be defeated by a Republic of Texas Navy again. The Mexicans purchased the 2 most state-of-the-art ironclad steam-powered warships in the world. The Guadalupe depicted in this painting was designed and built by John Laird near Liverpool, England. It had been built on speculation that the British Navy would buy the most modern warship of this type in the world. The Mexican government jumped at the purchase opportunity. The warship was a monster. It displaced 842 tons, was 183 foot long, and had 2 very high-tech Paxhan guns firing 68-pound exploding shells. If you look carefully at the stern and near the bow, you will see the two huge 68-pound guns. The Guadalupe also carried four 40-pound cannon and 150 men and officers. Truly state-of-the-art for any Navy at the time. It was the first steam paddle warship to cross the Atlantic, and it arrived in Mexico in 1842. The picture is of a model of a ship very similar to the Moctezuma at a museum in Mexico City. The Moctezuma was the second steam paddle wheel warship Mexico purchased. It had been built in London. It was even bigger than the Guadalupe at 1,100 tons, 203 feet long, with heavily timbered hull, and also it had two of the high-tech Paxhan 68-pound guns. The Moctezuma had six 42-pound long-range cannons in addition to the 68-pounders. It arrived several months in Mexico after the Guadalupe. Both vessels were commanded and operated by British mercenary sailors on leave from the British Admiralty. A third and much smaller paddle wheeler, the Renegator, a well-armed converted merchantman, was the final steam-powered vessel purchased by Mexico. In addition, the Mexican sailing ships were themselves more than a match for the Texians. They consisted of two large brigs, the Yucateo and the Inman, and two armed schooners, the Aguilero and the Campeche. April 30th, 1843, found the Mexican fleet with its newly acquired three steam-powered warships and the Second Texas Navy maneuvering in the Bay of Campeche toward the first major battle since the revolutionary victory at San Jacinto. Mexico and the province of Yucatan were again engaged in battles, and the Yucatan's government again rented the Texas Navy for protection. The sketch you are seeing is undated and not sourced, but it does provide an excellent and accurate list of the Mexican ships and their 59 guns, including four high-tech 68-pounder Paxhan cannons and a total of 10 40-plus pound long-range cannons. Commodore Moore's Yucatan fleet, which it's called in this sketch, had 50 guns, but they were much smaller and had much shorter firing ranges. Please note in the sketch the two huge paddle wheel Mexican warships on the left and the two smaller sail-powered Texas ships, the Austin and the Wharton, on the right, leading the Yucatan fleet. Beginning at dawn on May 16, 1843, events would unfold that would change worldwide naval history forever. Because several of the ship's logs, both Mexican and Texian, survived the Battle of Campeche, we know rather good written details about what actually occurred during the most intense 3 hours of the sea battle between the steam-powered, heavily armed Mexican vessels and the much smaller but faster Texian sail-powered ships. Faster, but only when the wind was blowing briskly. The most heroic part of the battle, in my opinion, occurred when the Commodore sailed right between the Guadalupe and the Moctezuma. Firing rapidly out of both sides of the Austin, much damage and death was inflicted to the decks of the ironclads. Commodore Moore also fired at the paddle wheel on the Guadalupe, and that propulsion paddle wheel was severely damaged and put out of action. This is a painting by Fred Toller of the Austin during the Battle of Campeche before she was severely damaged. You can see the Mexican steamers in the far right. By 3 p.m., the exhausted crew of the Austin had fired a total of 530 rounds. The Wharton had fired 65 rounds. The Austin had taken 11 serious hits from the very accurate Paxan 68-pound cannons with exploding shells, and she took other hits from smaller cannon. During the battle, the Austin had 3 dead and 21 wounded. The Wharton had 2 dead from an exploding cannon on board, but other sailors were wounded in the battle. After the battle, the accounts state that 7 Texians in total died and 24 were severely wounded. There were no accounts made by the Texans of the dead and wounded in the Mexican fleet. However, one account lists 47 killed and 64 wounded on the Guadalupe and 40 killed and 20 wounded on the Moctezuma. Other reports indicated that a total of 100 men might have been killed and as many as 187 wounded. No ships were sunk on either side, but the vast difference in the casualties and the fact that the Texas Navy was sail-powered confirmed this sea battle as the only time in maritime history that sail-powered ships defeated steam-powered warships. On June 14, 1843, after the Battle of Campeche, the majority of the British mercenaries' enlistments with the Mexican fleet had expired, and they wanted no more death from the Texian Navy. With the British departure, there were very few Mexican sailors that had experience with operating steam-powered paddle-wheel warships. Additionally, there were almost no Mexican sailors experienced in firing the Paxan cannons. The Mexican government never attempted to engage the Texian Navy again, nor did they try to reinvade the Republic of Texas. We knocked hell into them. We thrashed them soundly, and the whole fleet ran off. This is a great quote from the very brave Commodore Moore. The gallant Republic of Texas Navy found a home when in June 1846 it was absorbed into the Navy of the United States. In 1948, at the berthing ceremony at San Jacinto Battleground, Governor Jester declared the U.S. battleship Texas the flagship of the Texas Navy.
Now come all you young sailors and listen to me. With your hey, hey, blow the man down. Come on, you young sailors, and listen to me. Give me some time to blow the man down. Now I'll tell you a story about the high seas.